Every boast became a blow, every word a whip. Israeli hostages in Gaza were beaten as Ben Gvir talked tough. Barghouti was battered in prison. Families were warned. Politics turned violent, headlines screamed. But the real cost? Blood, fear, and broken lives. Who had paid the price for words that cut deeper than swords? Every time he opened his mouth, they paid the price with their blood. A recently released Israeli hostage told his family that the words of Israel's far-right National Security Minister, Itamar Ben Gvir, became their trigger for punishment. When Ben Gvir boasted on live television about worsening conditions for Palestinian prisoners, Hamas captors responded by beating Israeli hostages with horsewhips until some lost consciousness. Gvir's statements meant to project strength and nationalism into the Israeli audience became a tool used against the hostages held in Gaza. Channel 12 reported on October 17th that an unnamed former hostage described a pattern of retaliation. Whenever Ben Gvir spoke about how Palestinian prisoners were being treated in Israeli jails, the abuse intensified.
We were subjected to severe abuse every time Ben Gvir spoke out about the Palestinian prisoners. Once he talked about the limited food Palestinians prisoners were receiving, and they locked us in a cage and said we could eat one date and drink salt water.
The same source recounted that following another televised statement by Ben Gvir, Hamas captors entered with horsewhips and beat several hostages until some lost consciousness.
Once after he spoke on television, some terrorists came in with horsewhips and beat us until some of us lost consciousness.
The account came days after the release of the remaining 20 living hostages held in Gaza, freed on Monday in exchange for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners as part of the first phase of US President Donald Trump's broader peace plan. Earlier in the year, several former hostages had also said that Ben Gvir's conduct contributed to the worsening of their conditions in captivity. Among them was Eli Sharabi, who noted in March that their captors closely followed Israeli media and reacted to public remarks. Another survivor, Elia Cohen, pointed directly to Ben Gvir's statements as a cause for harsher treatment. At the time, the National Security Minister refused to apologize, saying instead that he was proud of his actions. His refusal drew widespread criticism, particularly from families of the hostages. Einav Zangalka, mother of former hostage Matan Zangalka, said at a rally in Tel Aviv in March that senior officials informed her Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was aware of the consequences of Ben Gvir's remarks, but chose not to intervene.
Senior officials told me that Netanyahu knew about all the torture the hostages are subjected to. He knew the meaning of Ben Gvir's statements. How, because of him, Hamas tortured hostages. But Netanyahu shut up and normalized it, and let Ben Gvir continue abusing the hostages.
According to Channel 12, defense officials had repeatedly warned Ben Gvir that his efforts to worsen prison conditions for Palestinians could lead to further mistreatment of Israeli hostages in Gaza. Despite those warnings, the minister's behavior has remained unchanged. On October 15th, Palestinian media reported that Marwan Barghouti, a prominent Palestinian figure imprisoned in Israel, suffered 4 broken ribs after being beaten by guards last month. Ben Gvir denied the report, but said he was proud that Barghouti's conditions had changed drastically during his tenure. In August, the minister personally visited Barghouti's cell, footage of which showed him appearing to taunt the inmate. The incident provoked condemnation from the Palestinian Authority and further fueled tensions over Ben Gvir's policies. Throughout nearly 2 years as National Security Minister, Ben Gvir has pushed measures to restrict what he described as privileges for security prisoners. His directives have included banning fresh pita bread in prisons, limiting shower times, and imposing overcrowding following the October 7 attacks. Ben Gvir frequently cites his prison policies as one of his key achievements. Yet, during his time in office, Israel's internal security agency, Shin Bet, recorded a significant rise in terror attacks, a period that has also deepened internal criticism of his approach and its unintended consequences. Meanwhile, the International Criminal Court has rejected Israel's attempt to appeal arrest warrants issued for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant over alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. In a decision that drew global attention, the ICC had ruled in November that there were reasonable grounds to believe both Netanyahu and Gallant bore criminal responsibility for actions committed during the Gaza conflict. The warrants provoked anger in Israel and in Washington, where the United States later imposed sanctions on senior ICC officials. Netanyahu denounced the court's decision as an anti-Semitic move, while then US President Joe Biden described it as outrageous. Israel had asked the court in May to dismiss the warrants while it pursued a separate challenge over whether the ICC had jurisdiction in the case. That request was rejected on July 16th, with judges saying there was no legal basis to cancel the warrants while the jurisdiction issue remained unresolved. A week later, Israel sought permission to appeal the July ruling. But in a 13-page decision released Friday, the judges dismissed the attempt, stating that the issue, as framed by Israel, was not appealable. The chamber therefore rejected the request. ICC judges continue to consider Israel's broader jurisdiction challenge. When the arrest warrants were first issued, the court had already dismissed a similar objection to its authority. In April, however, the ICC's appeals chamber ruled that the pre-trial chamber erred in dismissing Israel's earlier challenge and instructed it to conduct a more detailed review. It remains uncertain when the court will issue its final ruling on jurisdiction, a decision that could have major implications for how international justice applies to the Gaza conflict and for Israel's relations with global legal institutions.